Welcome back. This is the final video in our 5G series, God's Great Gifts and Guidance for Growth. The title of our lesson today is Simple Math, 25 times 1 equals 1. Now, you may be wondering, is this that new math they're teaching the kids? Or is Larry just not very good at math? Well, the answer is neither. It's something I heard a few years back, something that snapped me to attention when I heard it. Something that I've carried with me for years now, something that purifies my conscience periodically, and something that admonishes and edifies me when I seem to need it. So I want to share it with you as we close our 5G series. One last piece of guidance from God's Word as we close this series. To be completely transparent, this is not anything original on my part. Let me tell you about the time when this message came my way. I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, lived in the same house all my life until I graduated from college and moved out on my own. Moved to Houston, Texas to start my professional career. Then moved around the country for my job over the years. But Mom and Dad still lived in that same house that I grew up in Springfield, Missouri. So going to visit Mom and Dad from time to time was truly going home. And a part of going home meant going to church on Sunday morning. I was good with that. I was regular in my church attendance, then and as an adult. On this particular Sunday morning, they had a guest speaker, a man that taught at a Christian university and spent a fair amount of his time on the road speaking at gospel meetings or just a one Sunday morning sermon, as was the case on this day. As good speakers often do, he told a story. And he told a story that morning that you might call a math story. It goes like this. He described a time when he was guest speaking at another congregation. As he began talking, he noticed an elderly gentleman just a few rows back, straight out from the pulpit. He noticed the man because he was very attentive, looking straight at him, nodding periodically to affirm the speaker's comments. But about 5 minutes into the sermon, he noticed that the man was no longer paying attention. He now seemed to be reading the weekly church bulletin or fiddling with some other papers he had stuck in his Bible. The speaker wondered what he had said to cause the man to no longer being paying attention. What started so promising and supportive, it turned quickly to complete inattention. The guest speaker went on to explain that after the service was over and people were milling around, talking as normally happens, he noticed the man and made his way over to him. He was curious and was hoping to maybe strike up enough of a conversation to be able to figure out what had turned the man off. After a minute or so, he just decided to ask what had happened, why the man had stopped paying attention. The man was very concise and clear with his explanation to the guest speaker. He politely explained that he had been a Christian for 25 years. And a few minutes into the sermon, it was obvious to him that the guest speaker had nothing new to share with him. He stated that over the course of 25 years, he had heard a lot of sermons and pretty much knew what he needed to know. The guest speaker took that as a bit of a challenge. So he engaged the man further, probing further on a number of Christian topics. I remember sitting there listening that morning. At this point, the guest speaker's expression got very serious. A stern look came across his face as he described his discussion with this man. He looked out at the audience and said with intense sincerity, "Brothers and sisters, I'm here to tell you this morning that I've known many Christians that had far more spirituality and godly wisdom after 1 year than that man had after being a Christian for 25 years. I thought that was a pretty intense statement, but little did I know that the punchline was yet to be delivered. With the same confident and intense expression on his face, he scanned the audience and said, "So let me ask each and every one of you this morning a serious question. question. It's not a rhetorical question. It's a real question that every one of you better be able to answer. Have you been a Christian for 25 years? Or have you been a Christian 1 year, 25 times in a row? He let that question hang in the air for a while. And then within what was probably less than a minute, he closed his sermon and had a seat. I've never forgotten that question. You see, sometimes 25 times 1 equals 1. I believe the book of James has some words that can help explain how that can happen. How 25 times 1 can equal 1. James 1:22 says, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only." That's a pretty clear message. But that's not the whole message. That's not the whole verse. The whole verse says, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." Did you catch that? Deceiving yourselves. It's not being bamboozled by someone else. It's not being tricked, fooled, or deceived by someone else. It's being tricked, fooled, and deceived by yourself. You're fooling your own self. How sad and embarrassing is that? You've all heard all those sermons over the years, maybe 25 years of sermons or more like that gentleman. But James says that if you haven't put those words into action, you're deceiving yourself. You think that the rules of math govern your Christian growth. You think that 25 years of sermons ensures you of being a mature 25-year Christian. But James says unless you put those words of those sermons into action, you deceive yourself. You're coming up with the wrong answer. As we close out this 5G series, let's ask ourselves a question. In my Christian life, does 25 times 1 equal 25? Or does 25 times 1 equal 1? To use the words of the guest speaker that morning, each and every one of us better be able to answer that question. Thank you for listening to these lessons. I hope there's been something along the way that has encouraged you or challenged you or reminded you or in some small way helped you to take up the task of being all that God has designed you and placed you here to be. Thank you so much for listening. May God bless you on your journey.